Mr. Alizan Mahadi, Senior Director Research, the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia. His Excellency, Yeo Sung Bae, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Malaysia. Distinguished MAS members, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Malaysia Scholars on Korea event titled Building Closer Malaysia and South Korea Ties Through Challenges of the 21st Century. To begin this morning's program, we are pleased to invite Mr. Alizan Mahadi, Senior Director Research, the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia, to deliver the opening remarks.
His Excellency, Mr. Yeo Sung Bae, Ambassador of Republic of Korea to Malaysia, members from the Malaysia Scholars on Korea Network, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the 2022 Malaysia Scholars on Korea Mask Network event titled Building Stronger Ties, Malaysia-South Korea Relations Through the 21st Century. At the outset, I wish to convey my gratitude to the Republic of Korea Embassy in Malaysia for the ongoing support and partnership to drive conversations on bilateral and strategic issues. This year will mark the 5th year since the Malaysia Scholars on Korea Network, MAS Network, was formed under the auspices of an MOU between ISIS Malaysia and the Republic of Korea Embassy in Malaysia. Since then, the network of academics, teachers, and think tankers have congregated to explore questions for South Korea and for Malaysia. For instance, in 2017, the launch of the network was accompanied by a discussion on the possibility of a Malaysia-Republic of Korea comprehensive strategic partnership. In 2018 and 2019, activities were spurred by the peace, prosperity, and people pillars highlighted in the new Southern Policy for forums in 2018 and 2019 on Korean Peninsula and in-depth discussion on Malaysia-South Korea bilateral relations following President Moon Jae-in's visit to Malaysia. The pandemic years tested traditional forms of engagement. The 60th Malaysia-South Korea anniversary was celebrated in a virtual forum through discussions, though the discussions are no less vibrant on present and future issues such as maritime security, science diplomacy, and smart city cooperation. Last year, as both Malaysia and South Korea looked into post-pandemic recovery, the hybrid forum looked at collaborations, whether it is for vaccine diplomacy or for major power competition. This year, like many countries, Malaysia and South Korea began to open up its borders, began to open up its economies. However, as we approach 2023, and amidst the establishment of new administrations in both of our countries, we continue to face turbulent waters consisting of geopolitics and slowdowns in the global economy that will continue to test the resolve and resilience of both countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's post-pandemic is both familiar and foreign. Familiar because geopolitics post-pandemic is still shaped by two major powers where the US and China are still the primary drivers of global growth. China is the #1 trading partner of most nations in the world, while the dollar remains the most dominant reserve currency. Further, both stimulate international growth, whether it is through defense engagements, through infrastructure development, or trade and investment. However, the pandemic has left a strong impact on the economy. The cost of living crisis is on the horizon, and the global economy is expected to slow down further in 2023. Challenges such as climate change continue to threaten our very existence. In addition to that, the pandemic has incubated further major power rivalry. The pandemic illustrated the vulnerabilities of globalization, where closed borders and reliance on foreign markets impact the resilience of a nation's economy. While the effect of this is expected to recover with increased collaboration in a post-pandemic world, the interest to increase resilience by, for example, home-shoring industries, especially against the backdrop of major power rivalry, is imminent. Therefore, the post-pandemic trends also include alliance building along technological, innovation, and industrial supply chains, and increased engagements in Asia, whether these are for security, prosperity, or for people-to-people relations. Thus, we will see regional strategies, such as the Indo-Pacific strategy, becoming important tools for greater bilateral and multilateral cooperation. To this end, we are very grateful to have with us the role players in session 1, who will unpack the strategies to our outlook, the strategic outlook of the region. With a special presentation from Mr. Lim Sang-woo, coordinator for the Indo-Pacific Strategy Task Force and former Director General of the North American Affairs Bureau, we'll be most pleased to hear about the Republic of Korea's recently launched Indo-Pacific strategy and the strategic outlook for Malaysia and the region. Ladies and gentlemen, conversations on regional strategies will not be the only session in our forum. The year 2023 is also the celebration of Malaysia and Republic of Korea's 40th Look East policy anniversary. The policy that is an anchor to Malaysia's long and stable bilateral relationship with the East Asian region would have to address the 21st century challenges as it aims to deepen ties with our partners. The Look East policy relationship is set to mark Republic of Korea's third longest relationship with a Southeast Asian country, and relations have grown along industrial and vocational training, capacity building of mid-career officials from the Malaysian government, and closer ties between educational training and research institutions. The imprint of South Korea in Malaysia is physically marked by major projects in Malaysia, such as one of the Twin Towers and the Penang Bridge. While there is stability and growth in Malaysia-South Korea relations, a celebration of the Look East policy could explore new forms of engagement that could anchor relations. In recent years, ROK-Malaysia relations have grown with educational exchange, the New Southern Policy, and the Korean Wave. A 2021 survey by the ASEAN Korea Centers stated that Malaysian youth showed the highest interest in Korea at 97.5% of those interviewed, depicting the success of some of these exchanges. The engagements along the line of the creative economy can grow, especially if the creative economic engagement is tied with strategic outcomes. Further are possibilities to build stronger relationships in achieving green goals. This can be in the area of climate change, energy, biodiversity, or marine governance. Other areas of cooperation that could be considered include for engagement on defense and security. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Look East policy celebrating its 40th year is both a cause for celebrations and an opportunity. Today's program takes a look at the 21st century challenges and potential areas of engagement which can deepen Malaysia-South Korea relations. I am most grateful for the speakers from Malaysia and those who will be joining us virtually from Korea who would address these challenges together. To that end, I do wish everyone a very good conversation, a fruitful discussion, and also some possible ideas to be generated for the future. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Alizan Mahadi. Now, we would like to invite His Excellency Yeo Sung Bae, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Malaysia, for the welcoming remarks.
Distinguished members of Malaysia Scholars on Korea Network, ladies and gentlemen, selamat pagi and salam sejahtera. It is my great pleasure to open the mask seminar today. I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to Institute of Strategic and International Studies Malaysia for organizing today's event. And I also I'd like to thank all the esteemed speakers and participants for sharing your time with us today. The mask seminar has been held annually since 2017, but the seminar today is much more significant and timely. Firstly, this year we saw new government, new administration put in place both in Seoul and in Kuala Lumpur. And secondly, next year, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of Look East policy. So the seminar today will give us an opportunity to look back on the progress we have made together and share ideas on how to move forward for the coming 40 years. Over the years, members of MASC have greatly contributed to enhancing our bilateral relations by providing many practical recommendations and advices. So today, I'm looking forward to another productive discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN is the key partner of Korea. ASEAN is Korea's second largest trade, investment, and infrastructure cooperation partner. The Indo-Pacific region has strategically important sea lanes. One of them is the Strait of Malacca, through which almost half of all global maritime shipping passes. Therefore, peace and stability in this region are very important to ASEAN, but also equally important to Korea. During the ASEAN ROK Summit in November, President Yoon Suk-yeol presented Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy and Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. When outlining the new foreign policy framework, President Yoon stressed ASEAN is one of the most important cooperative partners in promoting Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy. This message clearly signifies the government's strong commitment to strengthen the existing ties and build even stronger partnership with ASEAN. Malaysia, strategically located in the Strait of Malacca, a waterway connecting the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, is the natural partner of Korea. Malaysia is Korea's third largest trading partner in ASEAN after Vietnam and Singapore. And we enjoy long-standing friendship built upon mutual support, both on bilateral and multilateral level. Moreover, next year is going to be a very special year. The Look East policy was launched 40 years ago to benchmark the economic successes of Korea and Japan. The main focus thus far has been put on human capital development and industrial cooperation. I think this is the time to upgrade the policy. I'm sure the new Prime Minister, Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim, is well aware of the value of Look East policy because he was the Deputy Prime Minister during the 1990s. I hope Prime Minister Anwar's comeback will be a big help for the future of Look East policy. I also think Look East policy can be upgraded in line with Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. This initiative aims to promote mutually beneficial cooperation in the next generation sectors, such as digital transformation, green transition, and climate response. In fact, many Korean companies are already ramping up their investment in Malaysia, especially in the area of high-tech industry and carbon neutrality. This includes semiconductors, EV batteries, smart cities, green hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, and renewable energy. As Malaysia is ahead of its ASEAN neighbors in carbon commitment and also very eager in attracting ESG compliant high-tech industry investments, I believe there is ample space for cooperation between Korea and Malaysia in these sectors. Culture is another area with great potential for collaboration. Since I came to Kuala Lumpur a month and a half ago, I could feel the huge popularity of Korean wave or Hallyu, particularly among young Malaysians. Interest to learn about each other is not limited to the cultural sector. It could also lead us to cooperate in a wholly new area, such as creative industry and cultural diplomacy. I look forward to your insights on how we can turn this interest and friendliness toward each other into mutually beneficial cooperation. However, these are only few potential areas for the future cooperation. We need to continue to expand areas of cooperation and upgrade our policy reflecting these developments. I believe we can transform our partnership, our relationship from learning partners to strategic partners that could achieve peace and prosperity together. In this regard, I hope today's discussion will serve as an opportunity to share ideas on how to align Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy or Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative with Malaysia's upgraded Look East policy. Today, I invite my longtime colleague, Ambassador Lim Sang-woo, who is coordinator for Indo-Pacific strategy. As an architect and pen holder of Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, I think he knows it better than anyone else in Korea. I'm certain his presentation will help us a lot to have a better understanding of Korea's new policy initiatives. Once again, I'd like to thank members of MASC for your dedication and help. And I'm looking forward to your continuous support and advice for the 40 years to come. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the opening ceremony for this program on building closer Malaysia and South Korea ties through challenges of the 21st century. We move swiftly into session 1, the Indo-Pacific and Look East policy at 40, realizing a Malaysia-ROK strategic partnership. We would like to invite our distinguished speakers and moderator to take their seats on the stage. Dr. Hu Chuping, you have the floor.
Good morning and annyeonghaseyo. And I really want to thank ISIS Malaysia and also ROK Embassy in Malaysia for supporting yet another significant mass network event. So this year, today we are going to discuss about issues that would set forth the pathways next year for both our countries to celebrate the milestone in our bilateral relationship. And I'm very glad that Ambassador Yeo Sung-bae has found himself in a very friendly and cordial environment to carry out his duty as the Ambassador of Republic of Korea to Malaysia. So today with us on stage on session 1 from Malaysia, we have the Deputy Undersecretary from the MINDEF, Ministry of Defense of Malaysia, Tuan Saiful, for joining us to discuss about the potential defense and security cooperation between Malaysia and South Korea. And also joining us is Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers from University of Malaya, Associate Professor in International Relations. Also joining us online is Ambassador Im Sang-woo, Coordinator for the Indo-Pacific Strategy Task Force, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Korea. And we are very honored and delighted to have such an important official from the Republic of Korea to brief us about the Indo-Pacific strategy of South Korea, and that would provide plenty of ideas for us to advance our bilateral cooperation in 40 years to come, as Ambassador Yeo has rightfully proclaimed earlier. So without further ado, allow me to begin the session by inviting Ambassador Im Sang-woo to provide his remarks on Indo-Pacific strategy. The floor is yours.
Yes, hello. This is Sang-woo Lim. Very much honored to be here, joining you, albeit online. It's an honor and privilege to be with you today, and also to make a short presentation on Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy. I've actually prepared a short PowerPoint presentation, and once I figure out how to upload it, I will start my presentation right away. If you can just give me a moment. Is it working?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay.
It is now full screen and you are good to go.
Okay, all right. So as I said, I'm the coordinator for the Indo-Pacific Strategy Task Force that's been established at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Korea, and we've been the task force has been on this very important issue for about half a year now, and as Ambassador Ya mentioned in his opening remarks, we are on the very last leg of our exercise, and hopefully we'll be able to publish our Indo-Pacific strategy before the end of the year. And let's see. Next slide, I'll go through briefly. It will be first, I'll touch upon the strategic importance of the Indo-Pacific region. And second, the main elements of our Indo-Pacific strategy, which will be the vision and principles of cooperation, the proposed geographical scope and priority areas, and last, the action plan. So this is the strategic importance of the Indo-Pacific region. I don't think I have to repeat all the numbers here, but the global population, the global GDP and trade, as well as maritime transportation, all these areas at the Indo-Pacific region has a tremendous role, and it configures as one of the most important areas in these particular elements. And that is why at the same time, we witness the advance of regional and global challenges. It is most important for the regional partners to come together and forge partnerships to tackle together these newly emerging regional and global challenges. And that's the background against which the Korean government has decided to come up with its own Indo-Pacific strategy. Actually, as you know very well, there are a lot of Indo-Pacific strategies out in the market, probably 10 plus. And we are one of the latecomers in coming up with our Indo-Pacific strategy. So one of the challenges that I personally had in our task force is to come up with really, fresh new ideas that would really reflect what Korea can contribute to tackling the regional and global challenges and making positive contributions. So that was actually the main theme that penetrated throughout our internal discussions, and hopefully at the end of my presentation, I will be able to make a case for that. Next slide. Yes, as Ambassador Yeo mentioned in his remarks, it was during the ROK ASEAN Summit on November 11th that our President Yoon Suk-yeol formally announced the key elements of our Indo-Pacific strategy. And I quote from his remarks, the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific region are directly related to our survival and prosperity. I'd like to foster a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region through solidarity with major countries, including ASEAN. So ASEAN actually is really one of the key partners with whom we would like to implement our Indo-Pacific strategy. So first, I'll touch upon the three so-called pillars of our Indo-Pacific strategy. So it's freedom, peace, and prosperity. And these three pillars actually come from our Global Pivotal State Initiative, which is the overall foreign policy orientation of our new government in Korea. This Global Pivotal State Initiative actually was one of the campaign pledges of our president. And once the new government was inaugurated, it became the foundation, and actually the foundation and I guess the orientation of Korean foreign policy, in which basically Korea would like to assume a more active role in commensurate with its standing in the international community, to make positive contributions to make a world a more a free, more peaceful, and more prosperous world for everyone. And that global pivotal state initiative, of course, if to implement it, you need to have concrete strategies, and we focus first of all on the Indo-Pacific region, which is of course the most important region for us. So the first pillar is freedom, and in freedom, we actually put in the importance of promoting universal values such as freedom, democracy, rule of law, human rights, and so forth. And this would reinforce the rules-based international order. And we would like to do this with all our partners and friends in the region. And the second pillar is peace. And peace, of course, is for Korea, the most important security issue is North Korea, but we'd like to go beyond the Korean Peninsula. So we'd like to play an active role in preventing disputes and possible conflicts. And this also based on, established rules and the promotion of the peaceful resolution of disputes through dialogue. And we are opposed to any unilateral use of force to change the status quo. And the last pillar is prosperity. And prosperity is, this is where we talk about establish an open and fair economic order. Korea is really one of the countries in the world that has benefited a lot from an open and fair economic order for the past 30 plus years, and we think that is important to promote such an order, even though the world now is faced with new challenges surrounding supply chain resiliency and other economic security issues. So that also is one thing that really we'd like to focus on with our partners, but at the same time we'd also like to work together to reestablish an open and fair economic order. And the next slide is the three principles of cooperation. Actually, when we first drafted, there are a lot of other principles. We came up with first 5 principles, and then somehow we narrowed down to 3, which is inclusiveness or inclusivity, trust and reciprocity. First principle is, of course, it's stating clearly that this Indo-Pacific strategy does not target a certain country or exclude a certain country. No, this is inclusive. We will cooperate with all partners that that share our vision of promoting a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. Trust. We believe that trust is really an important integral element in forging long-term partnerships. And this, of course, to have this partnership built on trust, we have to be transparent in our interaction with our friends and partners. Lastly, reciprocity. This is pretty much seeking a mutual beneficial cooperation where everybody comes out as winners. And we also, in particular, we like to share with our partners our own experience of economic development, as well as democratization, and also jointly promote technological advancement and cultural exchange. Next, is the geographical scope. This also, there are a lot of internal discussions, but we will not draw a certain line and saying that A country is in and B country is out. That's not our approach. But the general geographical scope of our Indo-Pacific strategy will encompass all these key areas. We identified North Pacific meaning the Northeast Asia, where Korea is situated, plus US and Canada. and of course the Southeast Asia and ASEAN, South Asia, that includes India, Oceania, that's Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. And we included the African coast of the Indian Ocean. Europe, of course, is a key partner in advancing our Indo-Pacific strategy goals. Next, we've identified 9 priority areas that correspond more or less to the 3 pillars that I just laid out to you. And of course, when we these priority areas will have to be worked on with our partners and also other ministries of the Korean government to identify key concrete projects that we could implement once they are in the Pacific strategies out. From the first priority area where we talk about establishing a regional order based on rules and shared norms and promotion of rule of law and human rights, all the way down to economic security, regional cooperation, climate change, and energy security. And the last priority area is promoting, facilitating mutual understanding and exchange. And so these are the 9 areas that we would like to focus on with our friends and partners. The action plan, yes. So as I said, we are targeting to have our final report on the Indo-Pacific strategy to be announced before the end of the year. We're actually thinking of the last week of December. And with that, the next stage will be to come up with a concrete roadmap, if you will, with concrete actionable projects. And that's where I think we really is the most important stage. Having a great strategy out is one thing, but the more important thing is to actually implement it. So I think it's in that stage where we'll be able to have more lively discussions with our friends and partners, including Malaysia, to really identify signature key projects that we could work together. Okay, so this concludes my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Im, for enlightening us with the comprehensive strategy of South Korea's approach on Indo-Pacific. And I'm very glad that it is from the overarching global pivotal state initiative of South Korea. So now we have a better understanding of what South Korea has planned forward for its nation's peace and prosperity. So next, we would have Mr. Saiful Nizam Sulaiman to provide his overview on Malaysia-South Korea's potential defense cooperation and pathway forward.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, annyeonghaseyo. It is a pleasure for me to be here to share with the audience on our Malaysia-ROK defense relations. Recently, in April, we have signed an MOU on cooperation in the field of defense. We had a ceremony online between both defense ministers. This is open a new chapter of defense cooperation between Malaysia and ROK. If we look back at our record, we established a defense relation between ROK back in 1966 when ROK opened up their DA office here in Kuala Lumpur, and 16 years later, Malaysia opened up our DA's office in Seoul in 1982. And then from there, our defense relations activities are mainly on military to military cooperation. We had our Navy to Navy talks. think most recent was in 2019, and then we had the airman to airman talk, and then we also have the intelligence exchange back in 2016. So beside that, we also have exchange of officers. We have about 13 Nation Armed Forces officers who attended military courses in ROK. Then we had about 4 officers who ROK Armed Forces officers who attended courses here in Malaysia. Beside that, we had also in terms of procurement, we had one Navy ship, KD Mahawangsa, built in Korea in 1982, delivered in 1983. And then we had about 111 units. We acquired 111 units of KIFV, Korean Infantry Fighting Vehicles, in 1995. While the ships are still sailing, the KIFV is still moving. So it shows that the very high quality of Korean products. And then we also are now working together with ROK in the under the ADMM Plus expert working group on cyber security. We are working together in this cycle until 2024. This is also another good bilateral platforms where Malaysia and ROK works together. And beside it, Ministry of Defense also participated in the Seoul Defense Dialogue. We first attended in 2013. That was the second SGD, I believe. I'm the one who attended SGD at that time. I still remember my boss giving me the opportunity because I just entered MINDEF in 2013, and that was my first international seminar. So since then, we have been sending our officials, including our SecGen, to attend the SGD, and this year we sent our one officer also to attend the SGD. In terms of defense industry, ROK has been very supportive. Recently, our Defense Services Asia in April, we had about 38 companies from ROK participated in the exhibitions, and then we have our ROK officials also coming to DSA. And then in Lima, we had the ROK Air Force Black Eagle aerobatic team who came in 2017 Lima, and they perform magnificently. Yeah? I think that's also another reason why I think we pick Korean for our next program. And then beside that, we also send one of our aircraft A400M to participate in the Seoul International Aerospace and Defense Exhibition in 2019. So looking at the future, the way forward of Malaysia-ROK defense cooperation, I believe there are lots of opportunity, especially with the signing of the MOU. I think there are many areas that we could explore, but I think we need to sit down as soon as possible, especially after the signing of the MOU. We have yet to have discussion at the policy and more strategic level discussion. If we could have that by next year, that would be good. I think there are, under the MOU, we have identified several areas of cooperation, but I think at least we could at least get one or two to start moving. Perhaps if I may suggest, if you are looking at military medicine, especially with the pandemic, there's one area that we could work with. And then perhaps in terms of peacekeeping operations, also another opportunity for us to work together under the ambit of the MOU. And hopefully with the new government approving our light combat aircraft programs, that will also open another opportunity for us to work together, especially in terms of the defense industry. I think we know that defense industry is important to us. We are also, for Malaysia, we are in the final stage of completing our national defense and security industry policy. And this could be also another boost for us to work together in the area of defense industry. We know that especially for ROK, their defense industry has flourished. I think recently, if we look at, they had, I think, a great contracts from Poland. Yeah, Poland buying so much assets from ROK. So perhaps I think it's time for us also to look back at the Look East policy, and also to look at our partners here in the Asia Pacific region. For MINDEF, we would certainly welcome the ROK Indo-Pacific strategy. Yeah, I think this would be a call for us. Recently, we had our partners from the West, Germany also have released their Indo-Pacific strategy. So look, it seems that all are looking at our region. We are becoming a hot chick. It's been a tension, a world in tension. Even though we know that on the other part of the world, we have people suffering in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So what I can conclude is that the Malaysia-ROK defense cooperation will be an integral part of the Look East policy. And I think it will be certainly an important element for the strategic partnership between Malaysia and ROK. I see there are lots of potentials in the defense, in the area of defense. I think if we can conclude the LCA programs, then we have covered all 4 domains with ROK. We have the sea, air, land, and also cyberspace. Yeah, I think with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saiful, for your very encouraging overview of our defense cooperation with South Korea. And I hope the audience have prepared some questions and comments, as we are going to have a very interesting Q&A discussion later. So last but not least, allow me to invite Associate Professor Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers to present his view.
Sorry. A very good morning. Selamat pagi. Annyeong haseyo to His Excellency Yo Sun-bae, Ambassador of Republic of Korea to Malaysia. Yang berbahagia, Mr. Alizan Mahadi, Senior Director of ISIS Malaysia, fellow scholars of MAS, ladies and gentlemen. Diplomatic relations between Malaysia and the Republic of Korea began 62 years ago in February 1960 Both countries have several similarities, including geostrategic location. South Korea in the East Asia is located close to major powers such as China, Russia, and Japan. Meanwhile, Malaysia in Southeast Asia is located on the international shipping route that passes through the South China Sea and Malacca Strait. Historically, Malaysia and South Korea were once colonized by Imperial Japan and experienced threat of the spread of communism ideology during the Cold War era. I think we have a lot of similarities. Of course, there are also differences. Although diplomatic relations were officially established in 1960, the initial relations between Korea and Malaya can be traced back to the pre-independence of Malaya in 1954 with the visit of the Korean Goodwill Mission to Southeast Asia. During the visit, the Korean delegation met with the Malayan leaders who were about to achieve independence. Malaya is considered vital because of its primary producer of rubber and tin commodities. Next visit was the ambassador of Republic of Korea, Choi Dok-sin, to South Vietnam in July 1960. Subsequently, there were official visits between leaders from Malaysia and South Korea, including foreign ministers, prime ministers, and the president. Ladies and gentlemen, the two countries have already established cordial relationship. Malaysia and South Korea have close cooperation, both bilateral and multilateral. They are members of the United Nations, ASEAN Regional Forum or ARF, ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, and the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework or IPEF. Therefore, it is not surprising that Malaysian and the South Korean government are working to improve existing bilateral relations into a strategic partnership that includes economic, political, and cultural. From an economic point of view, there is no denying that relationship is vital. For example, pre-pandemic in 2018, in 2018, the amount of trade between Malaysia and South Korea has reached 20 billion USD, making Malaysia the 14th largest business partner in South Korea, and South Korea was the 8th largest trading partner in the world and 13th largest foreign direct investment FDI in 2018. In addition, the construction companies from South Korea has been involved in constructing iconic buildings in Malaysia, including the Penang Bridge and KLCC. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the dimensions in the Malaysian-Korea relation is people to people or P2P. While the second speaker has spoken on the defense relation, I would like to emphasize a little bit more on people-to-people relations between our two countries. In line with the Lokis Policy 2.0 and the new Southern Policy of South Korea, which emphasizes the 3 Ps, they are namely the people, prosperity, and peace pillars. The COVID-19 pandemic has indirectly strengthened the relations between Malaysia and South Korea communities. This was through the supply of equipment such as face shield, test kits, water purifiers distributed by the Korean Chamber of Commerce Malaysia or KOCHAM, Kowe, Chuko, the Lotte Chemical, to the frontliners such as the Royal Malaysian Police and the Ministry of Health staff. At the same time, AirAsia donated face masks and gloves to the residents of Daegu City and brought back 2 Korean citizens who were stranded in Algeria to Korea via Malaysia. Therefore, it is not an exaggeration to state that, ironically, COVID-19 pandemic has opened opportunities for cooperation between Malaysia and South Korea, especially in the field of emergency cooperation in line with the theme of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, that is to enhance supply chain resilience. Malaysia can learn from South Korea's experience, especially in the 3 T's, which are test, trace, and treat, which successfully controlled the spread of COVID-19 virus effectively. The 3 T's strategy can be applied in Malaysia to curb the spread of disease outbreak in future. Ladies and gentlemen, in the field of culture and art should be explored in the Malaysia-Korea bilateral relation. South Korea has come a long way in promoting culture, arts, and entertainment. Korean movies, dramas, artists have been very well received around the world. It has been part of the Korean cultural diplomacy that Malaysia is trying to develop its own cultural diplomacy. Malaysia also has interesting places for making of films, dramas, and culture to promote. Therefore, there should be cooperation between Malaysia and South Korea, where Malaysia needs to learn from South Korea the experience of successfully developing its cultural diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are in the FIFA World Cup season, I know all of us spend night and early morning to watch the match. It must be emphasized that South Korea is one of the giant teams from Asia that has qualified for the competition 11 times. First time was in 1954 and 10 times in a row from 1986 till this year, 2022. Although it has never won the cup, but it is the first team outside Europe and the Americas to reach semi-final. And I haven't finished yet. We cannot underestimate that in future, South Korea will be a champion of FIFA World Cup one day, at least during my lifetime. South Korea football team should be set as an example or model by Malaysian football team as part of the P2P, people-to-people relation. More cooperation and training between Malaysian football clubs, teams from South Korea. Even players from South Korea such as Hong Yong-bo, Park Ji-sung, Yo Sang-chui should be football idols in Malaysia and as models alongside with those from Argentina and Brazil. On the other hand, security and order on Korean Peninsula remains a challenge. North Korea has recently launched artillery attacks into the maritime buffer zone. This action has violated the 2018 agreement, which creates a ceasefire, or rather created a bilateral buffer zone to reduce conflict. In addition, November 2022, North Korea has launched ICBM rocket into Sea of Japan to react as a reaction to the trilateral meeting between South Korea, United States, and Japan. Although the conflict may be considered far from Malaysia, it causes anxiety and worry because Malaysia has economic interests in South Korea and many Malaysian citizens are living and working in South Korea. Any armed conflict in the Korean Peninsula will harm the whole world. At the same time, overlapping claims in South China Sea, the crisis in the Taiwan Straits, and the US-China hostility are also challenging the Malaysia-South Korean cooperation, especially if the situation becomes more tense, leading to armed conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, Malaysia-South Korea relations are now 62 years old. Unfortunately, both countries did not have time to celebrate the 60th anniversary or Diamond Jubilee on a large scale in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the pandemic has indirectly brought the two communities closer together. The relationship of the two countries is like a diamond that is so strong that it can cut glass. But no matter what obstacles and challenges, Kuala Lumpur-Seoul relationship remains strong. With that, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Gamsa, Hanida, and take care. All the best.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roy. So now we are entering the Q&A and discussion session. So thank you, Ambassador Im, for staying with us for this session. So while I'm waiting for the audience to raise their hand to ask their questions, so I would like to ask some question about the Indo-Pacific strategy of ROK, which is about the change in the value or the enhancement of value in the Global Pivotal State Initiative. So just like what Dr. Roy has mentioned earlier, the 3 Ps in New Southern Policy has now been upgraded to the peace and prosperity still remain, and now we have the value of freedom. So how can Malaysia and South Korea, or in that way, in extension, Korea ASEAN, can achieve better cooperation through a value-based diplomatic relations?
Yes. Am I online? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes.
You
Yes.
can
Thank you
tap
for
on your
the
video.
question. Okay. I have to start my video. Okay. Sorry. I'm usually better with technology, but this is a new computer. Anyways, yes, as you mentioned, the 3 Ps of the previous government's New Southern Policy, now it has been upgraded to freedom, peace, and prosperity. And the freedom pillar, as I explained, it encompasses our Korea's vision to really contribute positively to promoting universal values that everybody upholds. So I think this is actually the first time in Korea's history that we've incorporated a pillar that really encompasses these core values, and this actually is an extension of the identity, of Korea's identity. We are a nation that was able to develop our economy, but at the same time, of course, there was a period of dictatorship, but we've now become a full-fledged democracy, and I think that's where Korea and Malaysia are converge, because Malaysia also, you've caught the attention of the international community with your recent elections. It shows how mature your democracy is. This is something that not only Malaysia but the whole world should celebrate together. This peaceful transition of power and democracy at its best. So I do think that as model democracies, Korea and Malaysia have a lot to collaborate together to promote these values. And of course, we are cognizant of the fact that there are different systems, there are different different regimes in the Indo-Pacific area, and we respect that. We are not here to impose such one particular model. As I laid out at my presentation, our vision is inclusive. So I think in that perspective, Korea and Malaysia could become key partners in promoting this freedom pillar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Im. The principles for cooperation definitely clarified a lot of the ideas and initiative for further cooperation. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Saiful. So within the available limitation, can you share with us the specific areas of cooperation outlined in the MOU Defense Cooperation with ROK, where the both countries can take part together? So is it about like demining operation, operation in the DMZ maybe, or there is some specific defense industrial cooperation that we can take forward aside from the light combat aircraft program?
Thank you, Dr. Ho, for the question. Our MOU basically covers almost all area of possible areas of cooperation. That would include defense industry, as well as I mentioned earlier, we have talked about peacekeeping operations. We talk about military medicine, and we are definitely going for capacity buildings, whether is it for military or also for the MINDEF officers, civilian officers. It's just not limited to on what we have so-called signed, what we have the right in the we have wrote in the document itself. I think what we need to do is we need to sit down. Perhaps we can have, for example, a policy talk between the officials of both ministries, and we can at least identify one or two initiatives that we can start, we can begin with, and beside the other activities that we have, either military to military or in terms of the defense industry. In fact, the way I see it, beside what Dr. Roy have suggested, that we should send our football teams to learn from ROK. There are also other things that we can learn from them, especially when we discuss about positioning our forces, not only in this region, but especially at the international arena. I mean, my daughter is a fan of K-drama and K-pop, so she knows better. But looking at, for example, Descendant of the Sun, shows how far, I mean, the Korean armed forces have gone to in the international arena. I think that's also something that we can learn from them. We ourselves are not bad. We have our a battalion in Lebanon. I think that's where we can share our experience together, because especially now we have peace is one of the freedom as a part of the pillar. So I think we can work on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that reminds me, our peacekeeping center in Port Dickson. Yeah, there is a center named after Mr. Ban Ki-moon when he was the Secretary General of the United Nations. So perhaps there are actually more area that we can explore than we expected. So in extension to that, before we go to Dr. Roy, I would like to ask Ambassador Im about the bilateral and multilateral nexus in Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. So how do you approach this kind of a collaboration? Because previously, South Korea has a presidential committee on New Southern Policy. So each of the countries here know how to approach the embassy in respective ASEAN countries to reach out for bilateral, and then from Seoul, there will be a multilateral outreach to ASEAN Secretariat and so forth. So under the Yoon government, so how would the outreach platform looks like? And does the similar mechanism are still in place, or under your leadership, the Indo-Pacific Task Force would be some kind part of the structure to enhance this bilateral and multilateral exchanges?
Yes. Well, as I said, we'll have our final report out before the end of the year. We're targeting for the last week of December. And once the report is out, the next stage will be to actually implement it. But to implement the report, of course, we'll have to have a organizational structure and a roadmap, and also I guess a mechanism within which not only Korea and the partners work together, but also internally for the Korean government too. It's not just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but all other related, Ministry of Industry, Economy that are all have to work together. So there will be some structural changes to implement our Indo-Pacific strategy. But I do believe that it's not going to be a major overhaul because the embassy are always there, and the foreign minister that will be leading this whole effort. Is we're here always, the headquarters. So there won't be any let's say a huge new ways of conducting business. It will be the same way of doing diplomacy as we did before with other policies. So rest assured that that we'll be there. We'll provide you with relevant contact points once the structural restructuring is done. But in the meantime, you have one of our best ambassadors there in Malaysia, Ambassador Yeo Sung Bae. He will be able to do whatever you want to do. So, and the headquarters is in full support with Ambassador Yeo, so there's nothing to worry about.
Yes, that is very assuring. So I'm sure we are all very confident, and thank you so much for that confidence. So Dr. Roy, I wonder if you can expand upon what are the concrete capacity building programs that South Korea and Malaysia can do. So in the second session, we will actually talk about the creative industry collaboration and such. How about in the area of strategic cooperation? Because I think as the extension from New Southern Policy as well, so the idea of enhancing ROK ASEAN and ROK Malaysia collaboration is to navigate the strategic uncertainties coming from the US-China strategic competition. So maybe you can expand about the supply chain resilience or any other area that you can think of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ho. I believe that in the case of in this strategic cooperation, that especially Malaysia can play a role as perhaps as a dialogue partner in this environment. For example, in the US-China rivalry that is going on, and as well as South Korea within the framework of the Indo-Pacific strategy. And also that I think ASEAN as a regional organization that consists of 10 member states, although that we are not directly involved in the so-called the Korean Peninsula conflict, but perhaps ASEAN can be also a dialogue partner in this situation. And also, I would like to emphasize that what I have mentioned earlier on is the cooperation between people to people. And it is ironically through the pandemic that none of us expected that it will occur, that it draws the people together. And apart from that, I also believe that in the area of education, especially myself coming from an institution of higher learning, I think there's a lot more to explore between ROK and Malaysia, between our local universities that includes UKM, UM, and the other public universities, and as well as the private universities. For students, exchange of students, it had already been going on. In fact, in my own class, both undergraduate and postgraduate, we have quite a number of Korean students either on exchange or they are here to obtain their degree. And I think there are more areas for possible cooperation MOUs between our institutions of higher learning that involves the people-to-people relations. Thank you.
So any questions from the audience? I saw there was some question on the Zoom chat box. So can someone check if there are questions there? And please raise your hand. Oh, yes. Dr. Zokri, please. Oops. Not enough microphone.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. My name is Zakri Idris from the Policy and Economic Affairs Center of Malaysia. I'm also one of the MAS members. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I have two questions. First question is to Ambassador Im. While we are ushering into the great power rivalries, which is going to be possibly be intensified and very uncertain in the years to come, how do you see the Korea Indo-Pacific strategy able to play as a balancing role within these great power competitions? My second question is actually to Dr. Roy. We've seen how South Korea has developed from the New Southern policy into the current Indo-Pacific strategy. At the same time, what we're left in Malaysia is the Look East policy that has been established since 1982. So from the Malaysian side, do you see any need for any innovations from the existing policies that we have in Malaysia so that we are at par to match with the new Korea Indo-Pacific strategy? Are you looking at any, besides the Look East policy, are there any other kinds of policies that perhaps we should empower ourselves, innovate ourselves, as well as overhaul if it's necessary, so that Malaysia and Korea are actually in the equilibrium stage to discuss with one another? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zokri. May I invite Ambassador Im to provide the response first?
Yes, thank you. Well, so I'll answer the first question. I'll try to answer the first question. That was actually one of the most frequently asked questions when we were working on this Indo-Pacific strategy. So what is the implication in this great power rivalry? What's Korea going to do, you know, in how to deal with U.S. or China and lining up and with a certain country? But in fact, my answer has always been that this Indo-Pacific strategy is not about Korea reacting to certain geopolitical constraints, but it's about Korea making a active contribution. It's about Korea making a positive contribution to the Indo-Pacific region as a whole. As I said in my presentation, before, Korea has always been focused more on what's happening in Northeast Asia, in our immediate neighborhood, because of course, the North Korean nuclear and missile threat. And that threat is still there. But what has changed is that Korea is now confident that we'll be able to deal with what's going on the Korean Peninsula, but at the same time, make positive contributions to advance these three pillars that are laid out in the region. And so it's all about Korea assuming a larger role and responsibility. And it's about Korea making a contribution that includes everyone. We actually, we talked with China too during the bilateral summit that we had at the margins of the ASEAN summit in November. We told the Chinese that this is what we told the Chinese, that we would like to make a contribution, a positive contribution to advancing freedom, peace, and prosperity in the region, and we would like China to cooperate too. This is something that everybody could work together. So that's actually the spirit with which we're promoting our Indo-Pacific strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Roy.
Thank you. Dr. Zukri, your question is what are the new innovations to enhance the Look East policy? I think when the Look East policy was launched about 40 years ago, a lot of emphasis was on the economic development, what Malaysia can learn from the economic development, prosperity in the Far East, in particular Japan. But things or a lot have changed since then. So I suppose in this new, rather the Look East policy 2.0, we witness the rise of China as well as South Korea or Republic of Korea. So there are some areas that I suppose that such as in the area of environment, that we can add on to the new Look East policy which may perhaps in 40 years ago, that was not too much concern at that time. It's not that there were no, but today there are a lot of concern about environment, on climate change. So these are areas that I think Malaysia can propose in this Lukis Policy 2.0 as we commemorate the 40th anniversary. Apart from that, as what I just highlighted, the people-to-people relations in the past was more to G, Malaysian government with the Japanese government or the Korean ROK government, but today more about people-to-people's relations, the area of cooperations that includes cultural diplomacy, sports diplomacy, as well as education. I think these are some areas that will be added into the Lukis policy in line with the SDG, which was not there in the original Lukis policy. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking of sport diplomacy, we actually had a Korean coach that helped one of the Malaysian athletes to score a gold medal in the Olympic this year. So perhaps there would be more hiring more Korean coaches for our sport teams.
Yeah, as I mentioned that, I mean, while we look upon countries like Argentina, Brazil, what about within Asia, which is not far from us, which have made it to the World Cup as well as Olympics? The closest we ever was in the early 80s, but unfortunately we did not participate in the Moscow Games. So hopefully when we learn from Korea, South Korea, and Malaysian football team can rise up.
But I also think that Malaysia can have a more structured approach in our bilateral collaboration with South Korea, because as you can see, ROK government has a very structured mechanism in approaching diplomatic outreach, MOU on defense cooperation and such. So Malaysia likewise should respond in kind. I think so far only Ministry of International Trade and Industry, MITI, has a Lukis policy task force, for example. So I think that should be replicated in other agencies and ministries so that we can have a more institutionalized engagement with our counterpart, and that would include the SDG area. So of which South Korea is actually a pioneering country because of the former Secretary Ban Ki-moon, who spearheaded the Millennium Goal that transformed into SDG. So surely there is already readily available expertise that we can rely on to advance our bilateral and also multilateral exchanges. So I would like to invite the question from the gentleman at the back, followed by Dr. Gita and then Ms. Angelina. Please introduce your name. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Albert Lee from Over Defense. Okay, first question for Ambassador Lim. Yeah, how does Korea balance its trade ties with the People's Republic of China with holding its own given the the increasing geopolitical assertiveness of China? The second question will be for the Deputy Undersecretary, being that following on from the light combat aircraft program, what other programs does Malaysia have in mind as opportunities for Malaysia-Korean cooperation in the defense industry?
Thank you, Albert. Dr. Gita.
Yeah, my question is for Ambassador Lim. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You just said just now in your presentation that ROK's Indo-Pacific strategy, the role of ASEAN is one of the key components, which I find very interesting, because if you look at other Indo-Pacific strategies, ASEAN is the centerpiece. We always talk about ASEAN centrality. So how does South Korea look at ASEAN's role within ROK's Indo-Pacific strategy? That's one. The second one is, I think under this new initiative, South Korea seems to want to assume a larger global role. So in that case, is South Korea interested in joining with Quad? Not engaging, but joining the Quad. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Angeline.
Hi, good morning. I think there's been a lot of questions about China, so I just wanted to broaden it a little bit. So there are other major power contestations as well, other major power involvements such as the US and Europe. And to broaden the question on that, how do you think South Korea and ASEAN's cooperation has been in managing these dynamics in the Indo-Pacific so far? Do you see them as fruitful? Have there been challenges? What would be your overview? And this question is for any of the speakers.
So I saw many hands up, so I have to collect them all. For this is the final round of Q&A. So Mr. Thomas, Minister Councillor Kim, and also Miss Iza.
Thank you, Shipping. Thomas from ISIS Malaysia. I have actually two questions. The first question is for Ambassador Lim, and I want to build up on Dr. Geeta's question. So as the coordinator of the Indo-Pacific Strategy Task Force, I would, and I'm looking at the fact sheet and it mentions the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific as, hang on, let me pull up that reference, as based on an unwavering support of ASEAN centrality and the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. I just wanted to get your sense, Ambassador, on what your view is after looking at the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. It is a document that is going to be 4 years old next year. And there is rumors that Indonesia could potentially lay the groundwork for an update of that document, although nothing was mentioned when it announced its theme for the ASEAN chairmanship in 2023. So I wanted to get your sense on how you think this Indo-Pacific framework of ROK can jive or can cooperate or can synergize with the ASEAN outlook. Second question, very briefly, is to Dr. Roy and also to you, Dr. Hu, on the panel. So we're talking about, the potential of this bilateral relationship between Seoul and Putrajaya. But one of the, especially next year, but one of the things that is happening is that, we have unregulated ship-to-ship trading in Malaysian waters, especially off Pahang and Johor, between ships of various countries and North Korean flag vessels. And I wonder if this could potentially complicate the bilateral relationship as we're speaking about expanding the strategic aspects of it next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. I have one comment and one question. First, the comment is on Dr. Hu, your question about 3 Ps and the new principles, core pillars of Indo-Pacific strategy. Well, actually, in New Southern policy, the first P was people, and second, prosperity and peace, which prosperity and peace has been taken in the new Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy. But people actually is, I think it makes more sense now that we have freedom instead of people, because peace and prosperity is a goal, whereas people, you can't have people as a goal unless you want more people or, yeah. So I think the value of freedom replaces people as one of the goals that we want to pursue in the region. And I think it's makes more sense and something that we should work on together. But the scope is quite similar, as you mentioned. And the question is to Deputy Undersecretary Sahipuli Jaiman. Well, thank you for your presentation and highlighting the defense cooperation between Malaysia and Korea so far. But I've noticed that the level of cooperation in the defense military sector between Korea and Malaysia is not as robust as with many other countries like UK, Australia, and even the US. But maybe that was because so far Korea did not have military or defense component in our initiative towards Southeast Asia, such as in New Southern policy, did not include much of defense cooperation elements. But now that we have Indo-Pacific strategy, which encompasses defense and military area as one of the core pillars under the peace pillar, do you see that we will have more chances of pursuing cooperation in this area, or are there any specific areas that you would like to suggest for cooperation between Korea and Malaysia? And also, since next year being the 40-year of Lucas policy, so far Malaysia did not also, on the Malaysian side, you did not include much of defense or military cooperation as in the Lucas policy yourself. So do you see any chances of Malaysia also expanding the scope of cooperation under Lucas policy to include defense and military area as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Councillor Kim. Ms. Iza.
Hi, good morning. I have a question to Encik Shaiful about on the topic of defense procurement and the defense industry. Given Malaysia does have a variety of platforms purchased from partners around the world, and it does show a lot of considerations, not just partnerships and commitments with these countries, but also considering of cost, budget, and what have you. With the consideration to pursue more defense industry ties with South Korea, do you think that's going to be a shift in these sort of commitments? Because the sort of platforms and everything purchased by Korea are linked with other countries. And do you think being committed to something like that, especially for such a long term, going to be taken positively or negatively by other countries who may perceive this as a tacit defense agreement with these group? Thank you.
So our audience reserve the most difficult questions towards the end of the session. So I would like to invite in the reverse order, Dr. Roy, please respond on the question about the trade ties and also what are the specific areas such as in countering North Korean proliferation activities in our waters, please.
Right. Perhaps if I can reply to the question regarding China.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think ASEAN as well as South Korea have important roles, perhaps to persuade China into eventually accepting and the code of conduct in regards to the issue of South China Sea. I know the issue of the code of conduct has been there lingering for many years, but I sincerely believe it is time that China, together with the claimant states, come up with something concrete about the code of conduct. At least this will enable us to settle our issues together among ourselves, rather than involving a third party that will, may complicate the situation further. So I would say that the code of conduct is of China's interests as well as the claimant states. It's time that it should concretize the code of conduct. And here, perhaps South Korea, ROK, and ASEAN can persuade these claimant states, including Malaysia and China, to kind of accept the code of conduct and make it materialize it, rather than just continue let it be a matter of discussion or that is one area. As for the question by Thomas in regards to the sorry, can you repeat the question about the
countering North Korean proliferation activities in our waters?
I think Malaysia, I'm not, and I have to confess that I'm not an expert in that field, but I think we have to be strict or have to be stern. I hope that the new administration as of now will have to be more stern in issues like this, especially when it deals with issues of proliferation of nuclear energy and things like that. So, and also it depends on the Ministry of Defense in terms of enforcement. While we can have regulations, but the enforcement has to be there. So Malaysia has to be firm in this area.
I think that will promote a better interagency collaboration within Malaysia as well, because countering proliferation activity has been under the Strategic Track Act, which is governed by the MITI of Malaysia. So I think enforcement agency, so not only MINDEF, but also Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency should get training on that as well. So speaking of which, Malaysia Maritime Agency, MMEA, is also a potential collaboration partner for South Korea's Coast Guard. So I hope in area of maritime security, we can actually have more opportunity to expand on that. So pali-pali ataupun cepat-cepat that we need to have a people-to-people exchange on that policy topic. So Mr. Saiful, you have some of the very tough question as well. So I think everyone can't wait to have more specific collaboration program between Malaysia and South Korea. And also, last but not least, from Izang about the shift in the potential Malaysian commitment to have South Korea as a new, credible, and reliable defense partner.
Thank you for the questions. I think I would answer Mr. Albert and Ms. Hiza questions together because I believe is more towards in terms of procurement, in terms of assets. Yeah, I mean, if we look at the Defense White Paper, Chapter 4, and then if you look at the documents by the services, whether it's 15-5, Royal Malaysian Navy, CAP 55, the Royal Malaysian Air Force, and also Army for next G, the Malaysian Army, we see that there's an effort by the services to streamline their assets, yeah, and to reduce the numbers, the type of asset that they are operating to a more sustainable, but at the same time more effective. So for us in policy, we felt that, I mean, for me personally, I would say that we should look back to decide. I think we have already enough of so-called Western products. Even the Western are buying Korean products now, as I mentioned earlier. So I think there are lots of potential. If you look at, for example, the 15-5, the Royal Malaysian Navy also looking at MRSS, multi-role support ship. So I think there's also one programs that we could look at ROK as an option. I know that Hyundai had a good design displayed during the DSA recently. So we hope to see more during Lima next year in May. So that's one, I think, option that we can look at, I mean, on the east side. At the same time, if you look at the Army programs, they're also experiencing obsolescence, aging of assets. So one of it would be their MBT, the main battle tank, also from Poland. So now even Poland are buying from Korean. So they don't build their own tanks anymore. So well, that would be for me, I think another opportunity to have that collaboration, especially in terms of different industry, because we have mentioned in Defense White Paper, one of the area that we want to emphasize for the next 10 years in terms of international defense relation would be on defense industry, because we see that the defense industry also has the potential in contributing to economy. And then coming to a question from Minister Councillor Kim, I would agree with you that our defense relation is not that active as compared to other partner countries. But I believe with the signing of the MOU, yeah, I think there will be more cooperations to come. As I said, we need to sit down, especially at the policy level, to identify what are area of cooperation that you want to focus for the next few years. Again, I think it will be related to the people-to-people cooperation. We are also looking at on the capacity building. I think we can do more exchange of personnel and also in terms of military courses. Because, for example, Malaysia-Australia Defence Cooperation is basically a non-procurement defence cooperation. It's solely on defense, on capacity building. So I think I'm sure we have many people wants to go to Korea. So that would be one way to enhance our cooperation. Again, get knowledge these days is a very high value, and I think that's where the basis of a defense cooperation is about building trust, to gain confidence, and for us to maintain peace and stability in the region. And I just have a short comment in terms of about the question on ASEAN. I think the ADMM Plus is a very good platform for us, for ASEAN, with the 8 dialogue partners, because we have all the so-called important players in the Plus partners. We have the US, we have China, we have the Russian, we have the ROK, we have Japan, India, Australia, and New Zealand. So, looking at other platforms in ASEAN, ADMM Plus has been one of the most active. And as you know, the military, when you give order, they just execute. So I think that would be also a strong basis for ROK to work together with ASEAN coming to your the Indo-Pacific strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saipu. So since the session is coming to an end, so I will summarize the questions for Ambassador Im. So in short, it's China, China, ASEAN, China, North Korea. So I would like to assure the South Korean government that Malaysia, together with ASEAN, would continue to support the Korean Peninsula peace process. So since ROK has introduced the audacious initiative, of which they hope by improving relations with China, so they would help a better leverage over North Korea. But I would also like to remind everyone that ASEAN is an impartial mediator on the for the Korean Peninsula. So we are willing to work together, providing a third-party platform for North-South Korea to sort out the differences and maybe restarting talks and reconciliation process. So in terms of China, I think part of South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy is to diversify partnership, so that, but yet trying to improving relations with China as well. So Ambassador Im, your last thought on these sets of comments.
Yes, on China, as I said, China, we're seeking to have a really good working relationship with China. China is one of the most important countries. It's our neighbor. We've been neighbors of China for the past 5,000 years, and we'll be China's neighbor for eternity. So we're seeking to have actually the new Korean government has made it clear that we're seeking to have a great relationship with China that is based on mutual respect and a relationship that is mutually beneficial. And as I said, our Indo-Pacific strategy is there to cooperate with anyone, any country that shares our vision, and that includes China. We've offered China to cooperate together on these different pillars that we just laid out. And ASEAN, of course, ASEAN is the central part of our Indo-Pacific strategy, and that is why during the ASEAN summit, when our president laid out the key elements of our Indo-Pacific strategy, he also laid out the key elements of the ASEAN KASI, Korea ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, which shows that our priority rests on the ASEAN region. And the AOIP as well as the ASEAN Charter were the key documents that our team made the use of. We rest assured we read every single line of your AOIP and the ASEAN Charter, so to explore certain areas of ways of where Korea can further cooperate with ASEAN. And hopefully, we actually talked with the ASEAN Secretariat, and one of the ideas that we floated was to have maybe some kind of joint document next year that would declare, how our Indo-Pacific strategy and AOIP are in line, and how we would love to work together to promote our joint vision and goals. And finally, Quad. Yes, Quad. We're very much interested in cooperating with Quad. There are certain areas that we think Korea can contribute more to, for instance, fighting the pandemic, public health, climate change, and so forth. So that's something that we also look forward to. And actually, it was not raised in the audience, but I just like to touch upon the importance of sports. I really do think that there's a lot Korea and Malaysia can do in sports, especially football. I remember growing up, the Merdeka Cup was the thing in Korea. Everybody watched the Merdeka Cup, and everyone was really excited when the Korean team did well in the cup. And I think that actually laid the groundwork for the Korean football team to become the team that we're today. So it goes both ways. So I think we can revive this tradition of cooperation in football. Terima kasih.
A lot of Korea, ASEAN, and Korea, Malaysia solidarity indeed. Thank you, panelists, Ambassador Im, Mr. Saiful, Dr. Roy, and everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our panelists and participants. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the program will be heading for a short break. We wish to invite participants and panelists for refreshments at the foyer. Welcome back to the Malaysia Scholars on Korea Network event. We will begin session 2 on searching for the cornerstone of Malaysia-South Korea relations. We would like to invite our distinguished speakers and moderator to take their seats on the stage. Dr. Noliana, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Farlina, for handing over the session. For now, we are looking at session 2, searching for the cornerstone of Malaysia-South Korea relations. My name is Nurliana Kamarudin. I'm from University Malaya Asia Europe Institute, and I will be your moderator for today's session. We have with us 3 very distinguished speakers who I'm very proud to introduce. We have Mr. Jazrin Harith Jeffrey, Senior Executive Research with Ideas. We have Dr. Helena Barki, Associate Professor from the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, University Malaya. And of course, joining us online, we have Dr. Cho Won-dok, Research Professor with the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. So as we've already talked about the Indo-Pacific ideals and initiatives in the first session, the second session, we will be looking more closely at Malaysia-South Korea relations itself, more specifically. And we are looking at how we are going to search for a cornerstone in this sense, looking at how the relations have grown and where in particular we could put priority on, particularly now that we are living in a new era where everything is novel and advancements of new technology has constantly create disruptions in the way we've lived, not to mention the challenges that we have today, constantly need paradigm shifts in how we address them. And these also all require answers that are not only solo in the way we navigate them, but requires a whole of community answer. So moving on with that, I will like to pass to our speakers. I will start with Mr. Jazrin Harith, and then go on to Dr. Bakir and Dr. Cho in that order for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we will go straight into the question and answer sessions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator, Dr. Nurliana. My name is Jazrin. Annyeonghaseyo. Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. So, searching for the cornerstone of Malaysia and South Korea relations. It was recently announced by the former ambassador of South Korea to Malaysia that Malaysia and South Korea are currently in discussion to elevate their bilateral relationship to a strategic partnership. Malaysia, according to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, Korea is actually top 10 trading nation with Malaysia. So looking at track records of the Look as East policy, the foreign policy of Malaysia during the first tenure of former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad attempts at economic regionalism through active and assertive diplomacy. His Look East policy, importantly, was geared towards reinforcing Malaysia's economic rather than looking at political cooperation. The economic cooperation between Malaysia and South Korea materialized to a great extent when both countries undertook mega projects, as mentioned by Mr. Alizan earlier, which was the Petronas Twin Towers and the Penang Bridge. So they first came as contractors and they elevate their trade in Malaysia to more investments into Malaysia. This paradigm shift when Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir came to power in the early 1980s, impressed by the growth and economic development of East Asian countries, particularly Japan and South Korea. He looked at to emulate and implement the work ethics of East Asians in Malaysia. He saw how South Koreans are very disciplined and very hardworking in their work, that they managed to elevate themselves and develop economically and bring them out of the economic crisis they had in the early 1980s and 1990s. So the Look East policy, which provided a mutually approachable bilateral atmosphere between both countries, emphasized the adoption of development model of South Korea and increased technology transfer and other linkages, subsequently contributing to the advancement of Malaysia and South Korea relations. So Korea still managed to sustain its economic growth despite setbacks in the early 1980s. Is there a cornerstone or basis to this Malaysia and Republic of Korea's relations? Historically, we look at the cooperation on trade and culture and new areas such as healthcare, digital, artificial intelligence, and the halal industry is yet to be explored, and some is already being explored, but more are to come. So major imports of South Korea were manufacturing materials due to their lack of natural resources, therefore necessitating foreign exchange to exports of industrial output. Malaysia, on the other hand, trade played a major role, and for an economic take-off-export-oriented strategy was implemented in order to get supply of capital and intermediate goods, as well as increasing markets for its supply of products. Malaysia not only welcomed foreign investment and increased trade, but also expanding their economic interaction with those in the Pacific. This can be seen by ratifying free trade agreements such as the Regional Comprehensive and Economic Partnership, RCEP, and the CPTPP. This visualized Malaysia's commitment to interact economically with other Asian economies. Malaysia-South Korea economic relation is not only limited to trade, but also manifested in investment. Surprisingly, until the beginning of Dr. Mahathir's administration, there was no official South Korean investment to Malaysia. The first investment of South Korea in Malaysia was in 1982, when Dr. Mahathir announced the Look East policy. It was then only $100,000. It grew from 1 to 3 projects to 11 projects to 29 projects in just a few years after the announcement of the Look East policy. As far as manufacturing is concerned, although investment from South Korea in this sector in Malaysia was not significant in the early years, South Korean investment in Malaysia concentrated in the construction, manufacturing, and the retail industries. Now, South Korea is venturing and expanding its halal market. Despite having minority of Muslims in the country, they are looking at the halal tourism, halal cosmetics, and halal food. In 2015, South Korea actually adopted the United Arab Emirates halal certification process to satisfy the increasing demand for halal products in the Middle East. The Korean Tourism Organization, for example, they actually publish an ebook for their Muslim visitors with recommendations for Muslim-friendly restaurants. I think this is a very good initiative that the Malaysian government should follow. In 2019, on the Halal Corporation, former President Moon, alongside NCT Dream and Datuk Siti Nurhaliza, launched the K-Wave and Halal show in Malaysia. Following this launch with presence of the famous K-pop group NCT Dream and our #1 singer Datuk Siti Nurhaliza, Malaysian officials stated that they are interested in exploring the halal market in South Korea due to the growing number of Muslim visitors there. So recently, the South Korea's SPC group owned the Paris Baguette Singapore, and they are investing 130 million ringgit to develop its first halal certified manufacturing and distribution center in Johor Bahru. The distribution center will be located at the Nusajaya Tech Park in TP, and it is a strategic location as it both has access to both airports and international seaports, not only in Malaysia, but also in Singapore. This allows this distribution to access wider Asian economies, especially when they are targeting the ASEAN market and also the halal market. So Malaysia has marked itself as a preferred investment destination in terms of global expansion, especially within the halal industry. So on top of that, the South Korea's creative economy has been growing since the 1990s up until today. Talking from experience, I actually previously worked with Doctor Who on a research paper on Korean pop and public-private cooperation. So looking at that, Malaysia and their K-pop fans invested a lot of time and money into K-pop. Malaysia has been one of the host countries for K-pop concerts even until today. Can you imagine paying up to 1,900 ringgit for one ticket for Blackpink's concert? It is happening today. And in 2019, when former members of parliament, former Minister Youth and Sports, Syed Saddiq, actually released a data on his Twitter, quoting that Malaysia live music and music tourism industry had benefited the country by supporting over 52,000 jobs, contributing approximately 3.8 billion towards annual GDP and account for 87 million worth of tax payable to the government. So Malaysia, being a host country for concerts, actually returned back to our investment in terms of tax payable to the government and also creating jobs to the youth and also the event management services that we have today. So K-pop, it has impacted social, cultural, and economic landscape of Malaysia. K-pop related content has been increasingly consumed, which led to a favorable image towards South Korea. So how did this whole thing happen? Take, for example, SM Entertainment. They produce groups like NCT, Super Junior, Girls' Generation, EXO. They collaborate with other entertainment companies in other countries, such as in Japan and in China, to cater to the local demand in those countries. They also adopted this approach where they built their branch outside of Korea, for example, the SM Entertainment Indonesia, which sets to collaborate with the local scene there. So local artists from Indonesia, such as Rosa, actually joined on board a foreign Korean K-pop entertainment company to elevate their brand image, and they get to perform with artists like Super Junior. But can these collaborations in cultural diplomacy strengthen Malaysia and ROK relations? Many may not have known, but we do have a diverse local talent here in Malaysia. Malaysia-born writer and producer Jelly actually wrote NCT's 90s Love and Resonance, and also he wrote aespa's Savage. And during the pandemic, although we did not see K-pop concerts physically, the Korean government actually funded these Korean concerts, and we do have our local artists on board, such as Aina Abdul, who sang fully in Korean, and they were celebrated and by all fans over the world through that online concert. So, could they be on top of the Korean economic creative industry? There is also a potential in our sustainable investments here in Malaysia. In order to widen strategic partnership in sustainability, the South Korean government has actually set foot here in Malaysia, particularly in Sarawak. In Sarawak, the Premier of Sarawak, Abang Johari, actually flew to Korea in order to develop our hydrogen economy. So they met to enhance the partnership with South Korean industries in green generation and innovation. There were three South Korean companies that have already and started investing in Malaysia in terms of hydrogen energy, sorry. Those are POSCO, Samsung Engineering, and Lotte Chemical Corporation. They have signed an MOU just to develop environmentally friendly hydrogen and ammonia. There were also other plans and other innovation that was brought by South Korean companies here in Malaysia. Malaysia is very diverse in terms of natural resources, but we may not have the necessary capacity or technology capability like the South Koreans do. So they brought in these South Korean investors into Malaysia to help not just develop our natural resources, but also our skills and talent in Malaysia. I think that should be it from me for now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to Dr. Helena for her session.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ling. You can hear me? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Good morning. We are still in the morning. Thanks so much to the embassy, ambassador, as well as ISIS for having me on this panel. I'm very happy and pleased to continue to be a MAS member. I feel it's a great honor. And also I would like to, before I begin, I would like to commend Westin for actually using glass bottles, which is great, I think, because we often come to hotels and we are given the plastic bottles, and I feel that it is small steps that are very important. So I would like to commend the hotel for this as well. So my main area of study is sustainability and cross-border environmental cooperation. So I'll be talking about the potential for the widening of strategic partnerships between Malaysia and South Korea in sustainability. My fellow panelists have touched a bit on it. I will try and go a bit more in depth. Well, we're going to start from May 2020 when South Korea announced its Green New Deal. So this was supposed to be the core of its COVID-19 recovery strategy. So in this deal, among the things that will be focused on is expanding renewable energy generation, greening the transport sector, as well as generating new green jobs. Here in Malaysia, there has been calls for us to emulate this trend of having Green New Deals. So South Korea is not the only country who has it, but it's one of the more prominent ones. And we have a new environment minister now. We have a new environment ministry, which focuses, or rather, we have revived the climate change element in our ministry, which has revived this interest as well for Malaysia to start thinking about a Green New Deal also. So I think a good starting point is to set the scene by understanding how both countries compare in terms of emissions for climate change. Yeah? So generally, South Korea and Malaysia, South Korea contributes around double what Malaysia does to world emissions. Probably not very surprising. So for example, per capita, 12 tons per capita in South Korea versus 8 tons for Malaysia. And total about 1.7 of all world emissions, South Korea, and 0.7 for Malaysia. So South Korea is, I mean, we're not huge on a global scale, but you know, South Korea is substantially bigger, more prominent, more, how to say, yeah, I guess a more bigger contributor to emissions. But Malaysia is also there as well. For both countries, energy is the sector that is contributing the most emissions. And for South Korea, this is about 87%, which is huge. And Malaysia is 41%. This is followed by industry and agriculture for South Korea and transport and industry for Malaysia. So we can already begin to see how both countries can complement and support each other in a low energy transition. which is, to my mind, energy as well as transport. So these are the two areas which I'm going to focus on today. So in terms of energy, South Korea is a country that actually is quite limited in terms of its natural resources. So what that means is that South Korea relies on imports to meet nearly all of its energy needs. For Malaysia, we are resource rich, so we are quite self-sufficient on energy, although we do import quite a lot of our coal. So in that sense, there is some complementarity there. Malaysia is, of course, notable for being one of the largest producers of petroleum in the world. Even though Malaysia is not a major exporter of petroleum to South Korea, the global shift away from fossil fuels have opened up quite a few potential collaborative opportunities between these two countries. So Jazrin has also mentioned, Samsung, Lotte, and POSCO has been quite active in collaborating and looking into potential exploratory green energy projects based in Malaysia. So he's already mentioned about the ammonia plant, which I'll touch a bit more later. But one interesting thing that I would also like to draw your attention to is a project with Petronas, which looks into carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So how this works is it's supposed to be that the carbon produced in South Korean industrial complexes will be actually shipped to Malaysia for storage. And Sarawak is also exploring similar projects with South Korea. So this is because there is a shortage of storage space in Korea since it's very industrialized and very built up. So the sustainable chemicals is the other element, which Jazrin has also mentioned. And the Sarawak Energy Green Hydrogen and Ammonia project is supposed to be a collaboration where South Korea would provide some hydrogen-based renewable energy to be used to process these chemicals. And some of it will be for use in Sarawak as well as exported back to Korea as well. So there are several issues and opportunities that arise from projects like this. So one main issue is that we need to think about when we approach problems, projects like this, is the offshoring of waste. So in Malaysia, Linus was a big issue in the past. So the issue of exporting carbon to Malaysia to store and to process can become a big deal, and we have to think about it carefully, if it's not dealt properly. And also processing of high-risk chemicals may also be a concern. And there's also a bit of an issue about how sustainable hydropower actually is, because hydropower is supposed to be the main form of power to power the green chemical plants. So these are some concerns that I would like to flag. But at the same time, we can benefit from South Korean involvement in these areas because Petronas and Sarawak Energy need help to build their capacity in this area. So even though we may have some concerns, this technology like carbon capture and storage and green chemicals are also technology that we need for our own interests in Malaysia as well. So if we do get collaborative assistance to perfect these technologies on our home ground, we can also, of course, use it for our own purposes. So there are these pros and cons that we also need to consider, and hopefully it will be more positive. The next one that I want to touch on is transport. So South Korea is, of course, well-known as an innovator in the automobile industry. And for Malaysia, of course, automobile sector is very important with our national car brands. Malaysia's automobile landscape has always been focused on collaborations between countries, between local and foreign brands, including South Korea. Going back to the Green New Deal and also Malaysia's own plans, both countries have plans to green their government vehicle fleets. So under the Green New Deal, South Korea has required 80% of its government vehicles to be eco-friendly by 2021 last year. And Malaysia has also announced that they will make the shift to EVs from 2023, electric vehicles. Of course, electric vehicles itself has issues because the electricity generation in both countries is generated from coal, which is not very green. So that's something that we have to remember when we talk about electric powered vehicles. But collaborations, of course, in this direction can take place alongside both countries' efforts to improve their energy mix. During former President Moon's visit to Malaysia in 2019, an MOU was signed specifically for building up cooperation in the automobile sector to advance Malaysia's national car industry in the area of electric and hybrid vehicle technology. And currently, Petronas and mostly subsidiaries are also working with South Korean automotive companies on green mobility, including what they call micro mobility, which is things like scooters. Yeah. So for South Korea, more involvement in this sector here, I think might be a good way to sort of balance or strengthen South Korea's position against Japanese cars, who seem to be a bit more popular here. However, on the Malaysia side, we do need to consider, the traditional barriers of entry of this sector, which we are quite popular for. We have high taxes, we have foreign share limits and such. So this is an area that we have to look into, whether this will be a serious barrier or not. One final point that I would like to make is that Petronas is actually very much involved in both energy and transport, the examples that I've brought here today. So it's especially important for Petronas to move to green energy in the long run, Petronas being, of course, our flagship GLC. As the global appetite for fossil fuels is waning, is reducing, it's, of course, in Petronas' interest to move to a new source of fuel. And I think South Korea can really help our key GLC in this. So I would like to end with a few notes, a few thoughts about the synergies between the New Southern Policy and the Look East Policy. So the 2020 upgraded version of the New Southern Policy has an initiative that talks about the formation of mutually beneficial and sustainable trade and investment. And the ambassador in the previous panel also noted the Indo-Pacific policy as well that Korea is developing about leading regional cooperation on climate change and energy security. So this connects well with South Korea's latest NDCs, nationally determined contributions to the UNFCCC, which place importance on international credits. So these are reductions from emission projects elsewhere, outside of Korea. So it may be possible that some of these projects that we mentioned and some of the projects in the pipeline can be utilized as international credits towards South Korea's NDCs, and likewise also with some returns on the Malaysia side as well. So this is an area where we can look into further. In terms of the Look East policy, while as mentioned before, Japan has traditionally been Malaysia's partner in this, the Look East Policy 2.0 announced last decade showed definitely a stronger pivot to South Korea. And some of the key projects identified even back then, 10 years ago, was already on renewable energy and green industry. So the trend is there, and I think the willingness is there on both sides as well. One important area that Malaysia can learn and benefit from South Korea is its strong tradition in science-based policy making. So over here in Malaysia, unfortunately, a lot of our policy is still made more based on politics and interests rather than science, or either way, science. For example, while both countries have 2050 net zero goals, South Korea has brought into force its 2021 Carbon Neutrality Act. So this actually binds them to their targets. Malaysia, on the other hand, is committed to net zero as early as 2050, which is a bit of a weak language, and is still struggling to table its Climate Change Act. So I'll leave it as that. In conclusion, I very much hope, and I think there is quite a lot of potential for sustainability to be a cornerstone for relations between Malaysia and South Korea to the benefit of both parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helena. So without further ado, let's move on to South Korea itself. And I would like to invite Dr. Cho, who is joining us online. Dr. Cho, please go ahead.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Luliana Kamarudin, and thank you, ISIS Malaysia. And it's my great pleasure to see virtually Malaysian colleagues here. I actually remember I attended a Moscow seminar before visiting Kuala Lumpur in 2018, and great pleasure to participate even virtually in the Moscow same event again. I would like to share my screen, PowerPoint. Okay. Is it working, right? Okay, so here I am presenting my perspective to the future and opportunities of relations between Malaysia and Korea, South Korea. Before getting started, I would like to note that what I'm saying here is not representing opportunity. I'm sorry. My opinion, my institute. Here is my take on the issues and discussions today. I would like to touch upon firstly the Korea's new foreign policy, especially focusing on the ASEAN ROK ASEAN Solidarity Initiative as an extension of the New Southern Policy and New Southern Policy Plus. And then I would like to give some assessment of the previous government and New Southern Policy. And then I would like to make some point for the future of our ROK and Malaysia partnership in coming years. So I will skip the discussion on regional strategic context in the Indo-Pacific, and I jump to the Korea's new foreign policy and Malaysia's and Korea partnerships. So I would like to get in some point regarding the ROK ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. First of all, as Ambassador Lim mentioned before regarding the Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy, the definitely ASEAN can be located at the core component of the Indo-Pacific strategy. In that sense, Korea strongly supports ASEAN and centrality and ASEAN outlook Indo-Pacific. So in implementing Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy and ROK ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, the component of that initiative will be a similar line with the component and context of AYP. And then in coming years, Korea also revitalized our ASEAN ROK strategic dialogue. And Korea will regularize the ASEAN ROK defense minister meetings, which was virtually launched in, I think, 2021. And then for strengthening cooperation between ASEAN and ROK in the regional affairs and regional security issues, the Korea would like to regularize this kind of defense minister meetings platform. And also Korea would like to improve and deepen maritime cooperation with ASEAN member countries by increasing transfer of more retired naval vessels and also extend the joint military and naval exercise with the ASEAN member countries. And at the same time, the Korea would like to improve and develop the cooperation on economic side for the co-prosperity. So in this sense, Korea would like to cooperate with the ASEAN member countries on digital economy, and also the cooperation on electronic vehicles and batteries and digitalizations. And finally, I would like to make a point in the sense that Korea would like to diversify its relations with the ASEAN member countries, not just focusing on a few countries. So let me touch upon the brief assessment of the New Southern Policy in the previous government. As you know, the former President Moon Jae-in unveiled his flagship foreign policy initiative, the so-called the New Southern Policy, in 2017. So at that time, Korea intends to diversify its economic and diplomatic alignments through the New Southern Policy, upgrading its relations with ASEAN and India to the level of its relations with the four major powers surrounding Korean Peninsula. In this sense, Korea has sought to diversify its external economic relations, reoriented its approaches toward Southeast Asia and beyond. So since the implementation of the New Southern Policy, Korea's initiative has been enthusiastically received by ASEAN member countries, and the general performance and outcome of the New Southern Policy for the last 5 years have been positive overall. But however, you know, even if the New Southern Policy enjoyed somewhat of a success in terms of improving relations with ASEAN, there are some lasting criticism for the New Southern Policy. It's a relatively underdeveloped and under-specified and under-resourced security dimension compared with the other two dimensions. So New Southern Policy received the criticism for focusing too much on economic issues while lacking policy initiative on strategic and security issues. So in this sense, even New Southern Policy security dimensions has focused too much on non-traditional security issues. In that regard, South Korea has been successful to realize strategic partnership with the ASEAN, with a leader sharing a long-term perspective on regional order, as you have seen the survey result from the ISIS Singapore in your survey. A second thing is important because the previous government was heavily dependent on cooperating with only a few countries, especially in Vietnam, when it implemented the New Southern Policy. And with regard to investment trade, most of the trade and investment have been flowing into specific countries by relatively ignoring and overlooking the partnership of the economic cooperation to the other ASEAN member countries. And also the official development aid also focus on some specific, few specific countries. So in that sense, with regard to ROK Malaysia corporations, we have ongoing negotiation on the ROK Malaysia Free Trade Agreement. In September 2019, we have a third negotiation for the ROK Malaysia FTA. And also, Korea and Malaysia are member of the RCEP and now the IPAP. With regard to bilateral trade, the total bilateral trade between two countries in 2021 is amount to 17.9 billion US dollars. Regarding Korea's export to Malaysia is amount to 9 billion US dollars. And while the Korea's import from Malaysia is amount to 8.8 billion US dollars. Regarding people-to-people exchanges, Korea's visitor to Malaysia is about 693,000 in 2019. It positioned at the 7th rank. And also Malaysian tourists to Korea is about 373,000, number 3 ranked after Thailand and Vietnam. And as other panelists mentioned before, the K-pop culture, including K-cultures, including K-pop and K-food, is popular in Malaysia, and also we have a large number of the Southeast Asian idol and K-pop stars right now and also we have Malaysian idols into it, ISIS. So in that sense, K-pop culture is very popular in Southeast Asia and also in Malaysia. So as I said before, the previous administration New Southern policies are relatively successful, but in some senses unsuccessful regarding the too much focus on the economic and cultural aspect, relatively ignoring the strategic and cultural cooperation between Korea and ASEAN member countries. And at the same time, as I said before, Korea's cooperation with ASEAN member countries overly focus on a few countries in Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam. So in that sense, I think current President Yoon Suk-yeol expressed his willingness to diversify economic cooperation in Southeast Asia when announcing Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, reflecting the shortcomings and weaknesses of the previous government policy ASEAN. So now, finally, I would like to make a point regarding future of Korea-Malaysia partnerships. What opportunities are available to both South Korea and Malaysia for strengthening their partnership in the future? So I think that the futuristic relations of the two countries need to include high technologies, green technology, as other panelists mentioned before, smart manufacturing, high value added industries, and creative industries, cultural industries, including K-pops, as a crucial aspect of bilateral cooperation. Regarding the Malaysia-Korea people-to-people contact, the K-pop and Korean culture, entertainment industry, and cosmetic are very important. First, I'd like to make a point that the two countries need to move forward to elevating ties to the level of the strategic partnership, figuring out the directions of Korea-Malaysia relations as soon as possible. So what kind of a cooperative opportunity do the two countries have? What sorts of specific initiative and project can the two countries implement to explore synergy between Malaysia's Look East policy and Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy and Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative? In this sense, briefly, I think along with establishing strategic partnership, in order to mark a new momentum of bilateral relations, experts and think tanks from both countries can help lay out a cooperative direction and ideas for more potential cooperation that covers political, economic, culture, regional, and international dimensions. So in that sense, personally, I would like to position the two countries' relations on a so kind of middle power partnership for economic security. Secondly, I think Korea and Malaysia will be cooperating on the targeted issue areas. For example, cooperation on economic security, including global supply chains and digitalization, energy issues, by cooperating under the multiple cooperative platforms such as in the future bilateral free trade agreement and RCEP and IPF platforms. And also, two countries can collaborate and cooperating on digital economy, semiconductor, as electric vehicle batteries and smarter cities. So, for instance, I heard recently from the news media that Samsung Engineering Corporation and 5 other South Korean companies have teamed up with Malaysia state energy companies, Petroleum National Berhad, to work on a project to capture, transport, and store carbon dioxide, an emerging technology for emission reduction on August this year. And also under MOU signed in virtual meeting, those companies, they are planning to carry out a feasibility study to assess the practicality of this project. At the same time, recently Samsung SDI actually announced that the
Dr.
company
Cho?
will yes.
If we could, just in the interest of time, if you could.
Oh, okay,
wrap it
okay,
up.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, finally, I just want to mention the final point. Regarding the cultural corporations, Korea can also cooperate with Malaysia in the theme of the cultural corporations. So try to help Malaysia and the Muslim cultural health by receiving the capacity transport and know-hows regarding the K-pops. So I'm sorry for past time, and I will stop here. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cho. And allow me to thank all our panelists for their insightful presentation. Perhaps I can start also by opening questions to the floor. Yes, Ambassador, please go ahead.
Actually, I have a couple of comments. Based on what we discussed the first session and second session. I want to stay longer, but because of my previous appointment, I can't. First, I'd like to start by saying the thank you to all who participate today, and particularly for those who that make today's event very meaningful. I think the seminar today is a really good opportunity for all of us to learn about the past and present and the future of Korea's involvement in this part of the world, and particularly the relations between Malaysia and Korea. Thank you for all the speakers for your insightful presentation and also answers and comments. We discussed today the past and the present of our bilateral ties, and also shared ideas on how we can make the future, the better future of our bilateral relations. Furthermore, in the face of the growing global economic the challenges, together with the intensifying strategic rivalry between the countries, I think this is the time for Korea and Malaysia to start seriously thinking about as a strategic partners to how to join together in responding to the pressing issues in the world and also in the region. In this regard, let me briefly share my thoughts, what we need to do, particularly from the point of Korean embassy in Malaysia, to realize our goal, which is the shared prosperity and peace. Number one is we need to facilitate more frequent high-level engagement. Unfortunately, for the past 2 or 3 years, we have seldom seen the high-level visits in either direction. Yes, mainly due to the pandemic, but considering the high-level engagement is very, very important tool in terms of promoting bilateral relations. We need to catch up on it. Secondly, honestly, as Professor Joe said, it is a pity the two countries still has not formulated strategic partnership, particularly considering the economic and strategic importance of each other. So, but I can say both sides, both governments are eager to make it happen quickly. So I am confident that both sides will be able to announce or formalize the strategic partnership sometime this year on the occasion of a high-level engagement. Then we will see more cooperation in security and defense or defense industry area, as well as in the cooperation in future generation, next generation sectors, which includes the high-tech industry and also related to climate change and carbon neutrality. Basically, this is the area where both sides can benefit from. Thirdly, we need to study more. We need to explore more and to seek a common ground between Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy and Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative and Malaysia's renewed, upgraded Look East policy. Now, as Ambassador Lim said, the Korea's foreign ministry is working to flesh out specific roadmaps on how to implement these new strategies. If I have any influence, I will use it, that influence to push Ambassador Lim to incorporate or reflect those ideas and recommendations put forward in today's seminar. And finally, our embassy in Korea will continue to its role in terms of the widening and deepening our bilateral relations. But in this process, we think the close partnership with the scholars and experts, particularly Mask, is very important. So I will make continued efforts to provide opportunities and events like today's seminar to collect and listen to your wisdom. And I'd like to finalize by saying thank you to Mr. Alizan and his ISIS Malaysia team for organizing today's very fruitful and meaningful event. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I think I speak for all of us. And we do look forward to having you with our future events as well. I think also the ambassador covered quite a few interesting ideas that our speakers have also covered in terms of facilitating high-level engagement, formalizing our strategic partnership, and increasing this exploration on common grounds. If there are no questions, we have, yes, Stephen in the back, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Stephen Leong from ISIS Malaysia. In addition to the interesting points about culture and food, may I suggest looking into the area of sports? And by that, I mean something that is practical and doable. As we all know, ROK, women golfers are outstanding, lots of experience. It would be very good if the Korean embassy could seriously consider bringing one well-known female golfer to come and conduct, say, a master class for Malaysian women so that they can be encouraged to do more in golf. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Perhaps we can also move on to some questions. Yes, please go ahead, gentleman on the left.
All right. My name is Kim Osman from Malaysian Youth Diplomacy. So thank you again for the wonderful insights shared earlier. I'd like to address this question to Mr. Jazreen and Dr. Cho specifically, highlighting the role of education diplomacy and cultural diplomacy between Malaysia and South Korea. So when we look to Malaysian educational institutions such as tertiary education and even secondary education, Malaysian students usually take Korean language. That is a course that is offered, and more often than not, it's very popular because when you try to register for it, it's full by the time you can't even do so. So do you think it's feasible in the field of education diplomacy, linguistics diplomacy, and cultural diplomacy to even promote Bahasa Melayu in South Korea and enhance cultural exchanges between from tertiary education and secondary education to South Korea?
All right, thank you for your question. I do think it is possible because 10 years ago when I was still in high school, there was actually a Korean mother who volunteered to teach Korean for students in our school. So it was part of our extracurricular activities. So we do need this kind of uh, people to contribute back to our education system. So she took the opportunity because her children were studying at that school at the time. So she volunteered to teach one of the classes in Korean. So I do think this kind of cultural exchanges is possible in terms of education. And we do also have not only Korean government scholarship that funded Malaysian students there, we do also have our own Malaysian scholarships send their students to, who send their students to Korea. So more scholarships like this should be given out, especially to deserving students, so that cultural exchanges and education exchanges can be done more effectively. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, actually, I'm not, I have no expertise on the education part, but from my perspective, personal perspective, I think we have a multiple route to improve the cultural exchange between two countries, especially you mentioned that the Korean language program. So we might have considered the expanding scholarship at the same time, exchange program, and also I think the exchange between the Malaysian universities and Korean universities, especially for the summer program like that. And at the same time, I think the K-drama and K-pop also improve the Korean language, Malaysian people more exposed to Korean language programs. So I think we have a comprehensive way to improve the cultural exchange between two countries.
I can also add in on this. Actually, Malaysian language is also taught in some Korean universities. For example, Hanguk Wede has an extensive Malay language program where we do have Malaysian students and lecturers who teach the Malay language there. Additionally, we also do have a high number of Malaysian Korean students who come to Malaysia to study, not because they are expatriates or anything, but specifically come to Malaysia to study as one of the destinations in Southeast Asia where Korean students who would like to learn in an English language environment. So we also have a Korean international school here. So we also have a high level number in terms of exchange students from Pusan University, Pukyong, Seoul National. These are just a small number of universities that regularly send exchange students here to Malaysian universities in order to study. So in terms of like a two-way partnership when it comes to educational exchange, it's always been quite healthy. In fact, Malaysia has been one of the earliest countries that sends tertiary students to South Korea starting from the 1980s. So it's definitely something that's been there for a long time, has been established for a long time and continues to grow yearly. All right. Do we have any other questions from the audience? If not, I can also ask some of my own questions. Perhaps I can direct my question to Nazrin. When you talk about how Korea has done a very good job in terms of pinning their stars and entertainment idols to the marketing of their products as well, do you think Malaysia is anywhere close to being able to emulate this kind of projects? Because aside from a few major pop stars like Datuk Siti Nurhaliza, we don't really have as much of an international presence in our culture. Do you think this is something we can learn from Korea, or is there something that Malaysia would need to do better to achieve this sort of marketing capacity?
All right, I do. Thank you for your question. I do agree with you that there's so much to learn, especially from the South Korean creative industry, how they develop from being supported by the government in terms of policy, in terms of funding. They were initially supported by the government, and then they become more independent throughout the years, and now they able to create their brands. So looking at their business landscape, they actually cooperate with other foreign nationals, such as in Japan, in China, or Indonesia, or even in the US. They get people on board to maybe contribute in terms of producing the music or in terms of choreographing the dance. So these are already business templates that already out there that our Malaysian artists can duplicate. And we do have our very own group named DOLA. They're well rising as well, but we do need a bit more of investment in terms of PR, especially in terms of marketing and how they can market themselves in Southeast Asia and whatnot. And we do also have those in Thailand with their own groups as well. But it is their investment in marketing that would set their future, because they already have the necessary skills and talent. Yeah. Thank you.
No questions? Oh, all right. Please, Dr.
So to Dr. Helena, what would be the most visible environmental collaboration for South Korea and Malaysia to start with? Because energy collaboration may weigh heavier on the corporate interests. So in terms of really achieving substantive outcome for environmental sustainability, would air pollution, reforestation, and other areas can be considered? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hu, for that question. Yeah, so indeed, the ones that I've talked about is quite high technology. And I have explored this in the past. You mentioned air pollution. So this is an area that I have done quite a bit of research in. So there are quite a lot of similarities between South Korea and Malaysia and Southeast Asia on air pollution issues. So we both face transboundary pollution issues. But even though our sources are different, so for South Korea, it's more industrial pollution, while over here it's more forest fires and burning. But I think this is a real good potential for collaboration, especially since we already have like the ASEAN +3 platforms that used to have quite a prominent environmental meeting, but I think this has kind of died off or slowed down. So this could be something that can be revived quite easily. And one thing that perhaps would be beneficial to South Korea is actually Malaysia and our neighbors in ASEAN. We have about 3 decades worth of experience in air pollution governance, and which is something that I believe in East Asia is still quite a challenge because of the political circumstances between the countries which are involved. So this would be perhaps a low-hanging fruit and also a direction of collaboration where Southeast Asia can contribute towards South Korea, because usually we talk about the other direction, but I think this is also a good opportunity for us to collaborate in our direction to South Korea. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps also I can lead into that question in terms of one of the things that creates the imbalance between South Korea and Malaysia's relationship is the lack of R&D in Malaysia. What do you think Malaysia can do or to learn from South Korea in order to create that kind of R&D development? So if Dr. Helena and Dr. Cho could take that question.
Would you like me to go first?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Lynn, for that. So in terms of R&D, I do not have specific expertise on this, but then I do believe, like I mentioned just now about science-based policy making. So I think that the tradition in Malaysia is still that the research that is done in the universities still stays very much in the universities. And we do need to step up and figure out really how to commercialize and how to implement some of the things that are happening in the universities here. I think for South Korea, that might be a bit more advanced. So policy making really does consider quite seriously the scientific outputs. Not to say that Malaysia, we also as scholars, we have also been involved in consultation. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity to engage. But I believe that, the amount of investment and the amount of weight given to scholars, it still needs a bit more of improvement in that sense. So for South Korea, for South Korea, in terms of how much investment that they fund for scholars and for sciences, I think is something that we can benefit from. We mentioned just now a discussion about, what do you call this? Educational exchanges. So I think not only educational exchanges at the level of students, but also at the level of scholars, of academicians, that could be an avenue. Yeah. So when scholars collaborate on projects
culture, research culture can also flow from one country to the other, and this can hopefully trickle down to the entire research ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. From my perspective, I think the research and development issue is very important for deepening two countries' the relations on the economic side and technology aspects. So in this sense, I think the exchange and Malaysian scholarships to the Korea need to be beyond just the learning language and other social science, to extend it to the technology training and education from Korea's the technological the university and something like the KAIST. At the same time, Korean conglomerates have their own institutions for their R&D and also marketing. So in that sense, the Malaysian and Korea in the private sector can cooperate between the companies institute and Malaysian's institute for the exchanging and explore the ways to cooperate on the R&D sectors. In that sense, I think the two countries may open some opportunity to the developed cooperation on R&Ds in multiple ways.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Cho. Thank you as well to our panel here on stage with me. As we are now 12:40, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to lunch, so allow me to say thank you very much here and end it with saying Onoren Yogi Kaji. And thank you very much.
Thank you to our panelists and participants. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the program is coming to a close. We wish to invite Mr. Alizan Mahdi, Senior Director Research, the Institute of Strategic and International Studies Malaysia, to deliver the closing remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I know I stand between you and lunch, so I'll keep my closing remarks short. So we have reached the end of today's program on building closer Malaysia and South Korea ties through challenges on the 21st century. First of all, I would like to once again thank all our partners, and this event would not have been possible without the support of the Republic of Korea Embassy in Malaysia, the presence of Malaysia Scholars and Korean Network members, and the participation of the audience today. Now, I cannot do justice to all the rich discussions that were made during the panel sessions, but let me highlight a few key takeaways, at least from my point of view. Firstly, it is very evident that there is really great interest into deepening ties between Malaysia and South Korea. And I think once again, I really appreciate the presence of Ambassador Teo Sung Bae before this to highlight the importance, and even walking him to the elevator just now and lift, he highlighted once again how important this agenda is. Secondly, I think the key thing here is that we are at a very important juncture and a very timely point in hosting this discussion. There are few ongoing activities that really are important for the relationships between Malaysia and South Korea. Firstly, we both have new administration in Malaysia and in South Korea, and this provides a very good opportunity to shape the agenda for the relationship moving forward. Secondly, we are looking into 40 years of Look East policy, and once again, looking into the Look East policy 2.0 or 3.0, there is an opportunity here to really shape a new Look East policy agenda, especially from Malaysia's point of view. Thirdly, South Korea, Republic of Korea just launched the Indo-Pacific strategy. And once again, this is an important time to really shape that agenda and its implementation moving forward. So I think these components provide a really important and strategic opportunity for Malaysia and South Korea to upgrade towards a strategic partnership moving forward. There are various issues of cooperation that were identified, and I won't go through them all, but I think the key thing here is also to understand the current landscape that we are currently at, coming from the pandemic, facing various geopolitical conflicts. I think there is a strengthened emphasis on security, whether that be traditional security or non-traditional security, and I'm happy to see that the new Southern policy has been elevated into the Indo-Pacific strategy to incorporate areas of strategic importance. So again, in terms of areas of cooperation, this can include areas in terms of defense and strategic security, but also economic security as well as we come out of the pandemic. So I think there are a lot of efforts that can be made between the two countries moving forward on economic security and strategic security. Also, in terms of more specific areas, we've heard a lot from the green economy, from the digital economy, as well as the cultural cooperation that I think South Korea is leading internationally, and this is something that Malaysia has a lot of appetite in moving forward. In more of an abstract level, I think there's also an interest to look into the cooperation in terms of value-based cooperation. Again, it was highlighted that the Indo-Pacific strategy espoused values such as freedom, human rights, rules-based order, and this is something that countries that are aligned to these values can move forward together with South Korea, and indeed Malaysia is aligned to these values. I think moving forward, the key thing that was highlighted is the need to formalize these engagements. First and foremost is to elevate Malaysia-South Korea, hopefully towards a strategic partnership, but also to build the institutional arrangements, whether that be under the ambit of Indo-Pacific strategy, whether that be under the ambit of Look East policy. I think there's a need to further formalize these institutional arrangements. And I think once again, we are at an opportune moment with South Korea finalizing the implementation of the Indo-Pacific strategy, and hopefully Malaysia can provide its input in events such as these. At ISIS Malaysia, as well as the MAS network, we will continue to encourage exchange in ideas, exchange in information, and hopefully for the embassy as well as the audience today, it has been a useful opportunity to share and exchange ideas on Malaysia and South Korea relations. With that, thank you so much for your kind attention, and I close the conference for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abizan. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this ends our program today. We now wish to invite all our guests for lunch at the living room on the UG floor. Our secretariat is available at hand to guide you. Thank you, and we wish to see you again next year.